Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A pleasure to have this chance to speak to you today. Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to this amazing film, Earth Mama. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
Earth Mama is a film about Gia, who is a pregnant woman with 2 children in the foster care system and 1 child on the way. And she is fighting Child Protective Services in order to get her kids back while also figuring out what she's going to do with her unborn child.
I understand it's your feature debut. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the genesis of the project, and sort of what convinced you that this was the right story to tell, this sort of pregnant single mother in the Bay Area. And I know you'd worked on that documentary with Taylor Russell, which perhaps informed some of your ideas about it. But what gave you the initial idea for the story, and why did you want to tell the story on screen?
I think the kind of initial inspiration for the film was thinking about what it's like to be a child, trying to understand a parent that's not around and why they're not around, and what obstacles maybe they were facing in their life, and then it was also kind of roughly based off of me meeting my sister's birth mother for the first time. And then I made that kind of short doc, which served as like emotional research for the narrative feature, and came back to the narrative feature with these layers, I guess, that I could put into the script, but also like more questions and what kind of further research did I want to do.
I think what's so incredible about the film is it kind of resists easy categorization. It sort of brings together, these moments of really sort of stark social realism, but then we're also pulled into Gia's inner world as well with magic realism, and we're kind of immersed in her imagination. What was your approach in that sense, and what do you think the effect of that is?
I was thinking a lot about the contrast between your physical self as a mother, and this kind of shifts that are happening in your body, how that relates to your relationship with your own parents, and this lineage of mothers that came before you. So thinking about that kind of natural relationship to her body and herself, but then all that kind of contrasts with this very unnatural, sterile world she's having to live, how she's having to relate to her children, and sometimes this very sterile kind of white-walled, gray carpeted, floored room for just an hour. How difficult must that be for a mother to parent in that circumstance? And I really wanted to lean into those contrasts as a way to allow audiences into what that might feel like for Gia.
And you really do build a vivid kind of picture of this incredibly bureaucratic system that people on both sides have to endure, both the social workers and these mothers, sort of the endless sort of checklists and dehumanizing questions, like you say, that the settings. Seems like you must have done so much research to really capture that. And why would it be so important for people to understand kind of what women like this might be up against, anyone who's a disadvantaged mother, but particularly Black mothers?
I mean, I think basically we're at an arm's reach away from this story. Most of us are, whether our family has adopted a child, or somebody in the family has had to give their child up for adoption, or has had their children taken away from them by Child Protective Services, or maybe they were the person that had to battle, Child Protective Services to try to get their kids back. I mean, everybody's surprisingly very close to this story, and it's just something that we don't talk about much. And I think that's what was interesting for me, is how do we create more conversations around it so that it doesn't feel uncomfortable to talk about as family members or community members with the people that are sitting right next to us. How do we empathize, or at least attempt to empathize with those people that are really struggling, within our community as a whole, and hopefully one day make it a bit easier for people.
And you've got such an incredible cast. I know you kind of mixed sort of non-actors with professional actors, but then right at the center, Tia as your Gia. I mean, what was your casting process like, particularly for her, and why was she the right person to play the part?
Well, Tia has incredible instincts, like not even having any experience with acting before. She just can walk into a scene and you give her a little bit of an objective and some backgrounds, and she can really be present in the moment, which I think is her natural talent, you know. But she also was a new mom when we filmed this, and still breastfeeding while filming, you know. So this idea of carrying a child in her body felt very familiar to her. She was training to become a doula. She had performance experience, but she wasn't an actor, but she had performance experience as a musician. And so in a way, she could really challenge herself for this kind of artistic vision. And so when we kind of met her and did like 3 or 4 sessions with her, it kind of made sense. She really just stood out for all of these reasons. And yeah, I'm really excited that she took up the challenge, you know, and gave it everything she had.
And I was reading in the notes, which I thought was really interesting as well. You know, actually, Tia herself is a much more sort of, extrovert, sort of louder person. So, and I wondered if that kind of added to this sense that she feels so conflicted all the time, like she's dying to kind of have more of a voice, and have that confidence. So you can kind of see there's so much more going on beneath, the person that's actually presented to the rest of the world.
Yeah, Tia is way more outgoing. Like, I think Gia is kind of a combination between both of us, because Tia is really outgoing and like she's vocalizing all of her thoughts and feelings a lot of the time, and that's, you know, one of her skill sets as a human being on this planet. Whereas me, I'm a little bit more introverted and oftentimes feeling like I have to be silent in order to make it or like get anywhere. And Gia as a character is a little bit like that. She's not a little bit, she is like that. She's in this situation where, you know, if she yells or speaks up, that could hurt whether or not she gets her kids back. So she has to practice restraint, which doesn't feel good, but it is what she has to do, to kind of exist and survive. And so when Tia plays Gia, she's having to practice that restraint. And I think what you see in her eyes and in her body is like all these yearnings to speak and yell and cry and all these things. Sometimes even it's just laughing, you know, sometimes you might want to laugh, but you have to hold it inside. Yeah, she's holding all that in. And because there's that kind of tension of who she is as Tia and who she's playing as Gia, I think you get these like amazing layers that the camera can capture.
And I think it also plays into the idea of trust, that she's almost not wanting to give too much away. She's wanting to put up this tough exterior until she knows she can trust someone. And, you know, as you watch the film, it sort of feels pretty valid for her to feel like that, because it does feel like she's surrounded by a system that is set up against her.
Exactly. And it's like, I think it's also a very relatable feeling, especially as like just women, you know, as a whole. Like, you don't want to be that person that's yelling or arguing all the time. You want to like hold yourself. You're trying to figure out your space and when's the right time for me to speak up about what I need. And how do I do that? And you're trying to figure out the best way to articulate your emotions so you don't come off as like this volatile person. And I think that's what's really relatable about Gia and how Tia plays Gia, you know.
And, you know, being on the shoot, it being your first feature, what were some of the highlights, but also the challenges? And I guess kind of pulling together these, you know, quite different moments, the ones that are kind of more social realist and the other ones which bring in more of the magic realism.
Some of the hardest stuff was the choreography. A lot of our blocking is kind of pretty complex for people that have never acted before, you know. We have this big sideshow scene, which is like this outdoor car party, and there's a lot of emotional beats that the characters have to hit. And it all is basically like one take. And that, like, the choreography of everybody, the moving pieces, the car doing donuts, people and their emotions, and me not being able to yell over other people, it was like really, really difficult, you know, but at the same time it was incredible when we finally got it right, because you just see how present you are as a viewer when you can watch a whole scene without any cuts, you know? So that was something that was really pivotal. And then things like the more magical realism, I think there were, we have these scenes of woods and these transition between kind of these places that almost feel like fantasy, even though they're right down the street from her. And these places that she is every day. And they felt very kind of empowering in a way, being on set and creating those images, you know. They're also some of the images that probably you leave the film remembering the most, that feeling of being in that space. So.
And in terms of the takeaways, I mean, the thing, being a mother of a 3-year-old myself, it all feels quite recent to me. You know, it seems to really capture so much of the emotion, you know, that goes into that process of becoming a mum. And, you know, it's not always just about joy, but there's also fear and anxiety and sometimes ambivalence. You know, it's something that we don't often see on screen and not discussed on screen, the complexity of all of that. So, you know, it was that kind of one part of it, but also hopefully prompting some conversations about how we can treat people better, because this does have a knock-on effect. It's not just the mother, it's then the, you know, their child and communities at large. You know, things need to be better than they are now.
For some reason, like, we really struggle as a community, a global community, to talk about like the trauma we had as a child and like learning from it, you know. And also, and when I say learning from it, not as an individual, but as a community. And I think a lot about the support systems in place for mothers specifically, who, yeah, have all these mixed emotions as they're trying to parent and trying to figure out this thing that nobody really knows how to do. And we're all kind of learning as we go. And I wanted to create that kind of conversation. You know, someone at the very end of the film says some really pivotal parts that I think feel so honest and relatable for so many people, which is all just around trying to protect your child when you haven't been protected yourself. Like, how do you do that? Yeah, that is like the message of the film, is like, we're all trying to do this. Some people it's a lot more difficult than other people, but like, we're all having all these emotions. And yeah, maybe we can all converse to make us feel less alone while we're trying to do it.
And also just, you know, reminding ourselves not to judge too quickly, because by getting, you know, into the head and the imagination of Gia and under her skin, then when she does make poor decisions, you're seeing it from a completely different perspective than, say, you just read that, or you came to that bad decision first. And that is basically how we should approach everyone, but particularly people in this situation.
Definitely. I feel like oftentimes we just read like a headline in a news article and like that's it. And we just have this picture of how we think that mother or that parent is. Or we hear someone talk about it and like we just demonize them. And I think if we can start to break away that kind of quick assumption of who they are and where they're from, I think hopefully we live in a better community, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I'm out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And I really can't wait for everyone else to have the opportunity to see Earth Mama. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Lovely to chat to you. Thank you. Bye. Thanks.